Well, January 9th, which is today, is observed as Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. It's a day meant to recognize Indians who live and work outside the country and the role they continue to play back home. India today has the largest diaspora in the world. More than 35 million Indians live across North America, across Europe and the Gulf and parts of Asia. These overseas Indians are not just part of global workforces. They are closely tied to India's economy through money, through skills and long-term links with families and businesses here. One of the biggest links is remittances, money sent home by Indians working abroad. We've all been hearing of it and what it means for the Indian economy. In the last financial year alone, India received over $135 billion in remittances. That makes India the world's largest recipient. Now, these inflows support foreign exchange reserves and also help cushion the economy during global uncertainty. This impact shows up inside Indian homes as much. Now, remittances are used for daily needs, for education and for healthcare. Families with members working abroad tend to have higher financial security and also greater spending power. Healthcare is one of the biggest areas where this money is also spent. Overseas income helps pay for medical treatments, surgeries and long-term care, especially in private hospitals. Education then is another major focus. Remittance money supports school fee, college education, skill building, shaping the future workforce. And today, we'll go much beyond just these aspects. On Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, the focus is about understanding how deeply Indians abroad remain connected to not just India's economy, but everyday life as well. So allow me to bring in our guests this morning who are joining us, voices from across the global Indian community. We're first up being joined by Soukthavy Chowdhury, business leader based in Southeast Asia. Good morning. Vivek Wadhwa, Indian-American technology entrepreneur and academic from the US is with us as well. Good morning, sir. And Adit Kothari, founding member of the Indic Society in the UK. Good morning to the three of you. Thank you for taking out the time and being with us here. It's a special occasion indeed because so much of the Indian story actually revolves around what Indians abroad are doing, what they're getting back home, bringing back home, and more importantly, the message they're sending out to the world about what is the true essence of India. Mr. Vivek, if I can begin with you. You left India decades ago. You went on to build companies. You've been teaching at global universities, playing a key role in shaping policy debates abroad. When you look back, what did India give you that Silicon Valley later amplified? If I can put it that way.
Yeah, you know, Indians don't realize how rich they are in culture and values. What did India give me? It made me who I am. The fact that I understand humanity, the fact that I want to give back to society, the fact that I understand the purpose of life and why we're here, the fact that I'm always now trying to learn from others and I understand pain and suffering, and my focus right now is on alleviating suffering. Money, Maya is important, but it doesn't drive me. Indians don't realize how lucky they are to live in this rich culture and values where we talk about these things as if they're normal. You go to the West and you talk about giving back, you talk about culture and values, family values, even the importance of education, and people look at you as if you're strange. Silicon Valley, where I live, it's all about money, 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 money. You go to a venture capitalist and say you're trying to build a company that'll help the poor, that'll help uplift humanity, and they'll throw you out of the office in the next moment. Here, these are part of our culture. This is who we are, what we are. So what did India give me? It gave me this sense of purpose and belonging and this determination. At even my age, I'm 68 years of age right now. I'm working harder than I ever did in my life because I consider it my mission to give back to humanity. This is what India gave me.
How lovely. Mr. Kothari, if I can now come to you and shift the conversation from just the economics and the key highlight of what really Indians truly feel about their culture. Tell us how you think the role of Indian diaspora has evolved from being economic contributors alone, because largely the last 2 decades or so, that's been the story of Indians who are working abroad. So from that to active narrative shapers now.
So I think when we look at the Indian diaspora abroad, slowly, they have achieved high feats in domains of economics, in technology, in the IT sector, etc. And that automatically sort of translates into, them sort of ensuring that they are lobbying for better policies, and as a consequence, they are then becoming narrative shapers. Now, as a consequence of what is happening politically across the Americas and the UK, for example, the rise of anti-Hindu and anti-India hate, we've seen a surge of almost 700% of hate crimes against the Hindu diaspora in the UK since the Leicester riots, since 2022. So they have now actively come into countering the misinformation that has now spread across the academic domains and the journalistic domains. So now Indians are slowly sort of understanding the importance of using that soft power and leveraging it to ensure that they can consolidate their positions better and ensure that, the communities, the other host nations, the other diasporas that live abroad, understand the significance of Indian diaspora living with them. I mean, Mr. Wadhwa is from the US, so he'd probably concur with me. The kind of taxes that the Indians are actually contributing to the UK, I think it's to the tune of almost about $300 billion. It's unparalleled with the kind of proportion of population that they are of the US, and the kind of contributions that they're providing in terms of taxations is massive. So the communities need to understand how important it is to have communities like the Indians who are net contributors and not net consumers. Whereas, there are communities which are coming across into the Western world who are predominantly coming in as not as economic immigrants, but as immigrants who predominantly want to basically extract out of the systems. And that is not what the Indian diaspora stands for. So I think that sort of narrative building is slowly now starting. People are starting to have those important conversations as to how much, low crime rate the Indian diaspora is involved in and how much of a net contributor they are.
And that plays a huge role in how Indians are viewed abroad, across the world. Mr. Chowdhury, good morning. Let me ask you, how do you then strike the balance? So we've spoken about the economics of it all, what Indians bring to the table. Why is it such a warm reception everywhere we go? There is something that we leave behind, but you've had your own share of experience. Tell us, how do you kind of strike that balance? So you got to be competitive out there, but at the same time, Indians want to make sure that they're not losing their cultural grounding. How does that happen? How do you make it happen?
Yes, sir. You see, we are Northeast in Assam and Laos is almost similar culture. And we also always inviting our culture Northeast Indian culture in Laos, and we show them to how is our culture is, how is your culture is almost same. And last time is our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, his own visit in Laos. Then we show in front of him Bihu dance. Which one is he like it? And he asking is once more, and their performance is 2 times.
Not just that, we've seen how when Indian leaders travel abroad, there is so much of Indian delicacies now on the menu. There's so much change that we've seen essentially the last decade or so. Mr. Wadhwa, has the idea India or the world changed to India and the world, especially for many young Indians abroad who've been looking at that opportunity and finally have been able to get to that point?
First of all, what has changed is that India is now a land of opportunity. When my generation came from India to the United States, there was no opportunity in India. The country was practically going bankrupt under the policies that had been implemented. There was nothing to do over here. Now there's more opportunity for young entrepreneurs, even for students who study abroad in India than there is in the West. So they see this now as a country that is, rising, that has all the talent that they need to be able to build companies or to implement their ideas. So they're now looking at India in a very positive light. They're not ashamed of India like a previous generation of Indians were. They're actually proud of their country. So this mindset change is leading now to many people coming back to India to build over here. And it's causing people like me who live in Silicon Valley to build their companies in India because of what India has to offer. It's a huge, huge change from just 20 or 30 years ago.
Can you just quickly put out an interesting story for us, a story that can inspire us to actually think that yes, many are walking that talk, many are now turning back to India. So there are people who've moved away, they've been abroad for a few years and are now looking at job opportunities back in India. So tell us if you have any interesting stories, Mr. Wadhwa, of this reverse trend that's kicked in sharply the last 5 to 10 years.
I can tell you my own story.
Okay.
See, I lost my wife to cancer, decided I'm going to do something about making sure that no one suffers the way she did. I started developing a technology that can diagnose disease at the earliest stage. Now, living in Silicon Valley, my first instinct was to raise $20 or $30 million in Silicon Valley. But again, as I said earlier, when I spoke to the venture capitalists there and said this is to help poor, to help the people in need, they just couldn't understand it. And I came to India. I bet my future on India. I started doing R&D over here. India has an inferiority complex. This is one of the things that still bothers me, that India doesn't believe what it can do. It doesn't believe it has deep tech. It doesn't believe it has AI talent. It doesn't believe it has entrepreneurial skills. I came here and within 2 years, India has built technology for me, achieved what could possibly not happen in the West. So, you talk about betting on India and this trend, I'm doing it. As are the people I have working for me in India. I have AI developers, I have plasma scientists, I have engineers, I have an entire range of very highly deep science and technology skills. People working in India, not once do they ever talk about going to the United States. They want to build in India, for India, and then share with the world. So this entire mindset change has happened. And India doesn't realize it's like the frog in the boiling water. You don't realize how hard it's getting. Well, India is there now. India is the land of opportunity in innovation, in deep science, in artificial intelligence. You talk about anything that needs to be done, it can happen in India. And that
but
also
had these young
for a fraction of the
entrepreneurs, Mr.
cost
Wadhwa, and you
and
can
with
correct
the
me if I'm
values.
wrong, had they turned back to India a little sooner, possibly we would have been a little ahead in the AI race or in the tech race. So we're slightly late, I think. But yeah, the Indian story finally has arrived. So it's great news overall. Adit, tell us about diaspora and the second, third generation. So we're now essentially seeing, the diaspora constitutes of second, third generation Indians. How do you think in their mind the idea of being Indian has evolved over the last few years, if at all?
So I think because of the cultural connotations that they brought up with, the sort of emotional investment in their lives is very high. And that is through the various festivities that we have, the cultural festivities, be it Diwali, Holi, their own sort of regional festivities, be it Chhath. I'm from West Bengal, so Durga Puja is massive for us. And you see that kind of emotional investment translating onto the streets of London and New York, where, Durga Puja is celebrated across the 9 days with high amount of spirits. And, we're not sort of unfazed any longer. We're not scared of demonstrating who we are. We're very proud of actually celebrating and showing our cultural dominance. That we are a civilization of 5,000 years old, and this is the kind of cultural connotations that we bring across to your streets. Diwali is now celebrated as a global festival. Holi is actually celebrated as a global festival, where you see rave parties basically being held with colors and etc. So I think there is that sort of emotional investment, and the young Indians who are the Indian origin people of various backgrounds are now growing up, understanding what it means to them. They're understanding their civilizational roots, they're understanding their history, and now they're connecting to it. I think where we are
so they no
certainly
longer feel
lacking,
confined to religious practices, cultural participation, festive participation. They're actually embracing it more and more. And
that's
they're
true.
enjoying
I mean, you say my daughter would identify herself as a British Indian. She wouldn't just identify herself as British only. Similarly, Americans growing up in the US would identify themselves as Indian Americans. Rishi Sunak has been one of the biggest mantle bearers of our civilization value system. I mean, he took the oath on Gita. There was a big amount of ruckus about it, but there was also vast amount of support for it, because he was embracing his identity, and he's not scared of embracing who he truly was. He's an Indian he's a British of Indian origin, and he was elected to become the prime minister, the first Asian prime minister of Britain. But at the same time, I feel from a governmental perspective, from a policymaker perspective, there needs to be more outreach done through the various missions to ensure that, you know, these various people living across the seven seas, they feel sort of not alienated. They are just not looked as partial stakeholders where they're basically investing into the Indian economy and becoming part of that whole churning system through, becoming the economic remittance holders. They need to be felt more secure. So I'm not saying that, you know, they should be given dual citizenship, but the OCI needs to be strengthened further to ensure that, you know, they're given a bit more leverage of being...
And so they can make... frequent trips to India, not to take away from the seriousness of the conversation, but yeah.
Absolutely. Just not that, but also the fact that, you know, OCIs are now being looked at as more as privilege rather than right.
Okay. Mr. Chowdhury, I'd like to bring you in and look at the micro picture here. If an Indian today wants to build a career outside of India, what skill matters more than degree?
Skill matter, you see, take risks. Whenever you take the risks, there is success. People are said always that waiting for the right time and right decision. Right decision is never coming. That's why you have to take your own decision and you have to take the risks. When is the risk is the success, and when is the mistake? You did the mistake, and after mistake, you do the success. That is the mean success. Some people mistake mean. You take the mistake, that means you are success. You don't do the mistake, this you are not success. That's why our people, I tell them whenever people coming, you see, you have to take the risks. Without takes, you cannot grow, because you say the right time. Right time never come to you.
Oh, yes, I agree. Mr. Wadhwa, what is it about Indians? So you spoke of how India is already there. Indians are right on top. We do not need to feel the inferiority complex that we're coping with or fighting on a daily basis. But what is it about Indians abroad that makes them so successful? As founders, as innovators, is it something to do with the education model, or is it the cultural mindset, or there's more?
Let's look at Satya Nadella. Okay, he runs one of the most valuable companies in the world. Before Satya Nadella took over Microsoft, it was known as the evil empire. You know, people used to talk about Bill Gates being Darth Vader. And then along came Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer, if you Google him, you'll see videos of him acting like a monkey, literally getting on stage, hoo hoo ha ha, and then the killer sales mindset he brought into the company. Microsoft was the most hated company in the world before Satya came in there. Within 10 years, he transformed Microsoft into a company that's respected, that across the industry, it's no longer considered as a dying company, as an evil dinosaur. It's considered to be the future. I mean, everyone respects the company. What did Satya do? He brought in his deep Indian culture and values of respect. I mean, you don't when you look at Satya Nadella versus Elon Musk. Elon Musk is hated by half of America. Even though he's the greatest innovator of our time, people despise him, they hate him, they fear him. Satya Nadella, gentle, mild, respectful. He's increased the value of the company more than tenfold. And he's also now turned it into a company that people consider to be the future rather than the past. This is because of the values and the culture he brought into it. That's where the magic happened.
Okay, that's where the magic happened. It sounds magical as well. Adit, is this magic being embraced by the young diaspora? So you spoke of your daughter, you gave us a small example, but do you think increasingly they're very, very concerned about the image India enjoys in their country? So in UK, for instance, how concerned is your daughter about what people say about Indians and what they have to really say about the country?
So that is where I think India needs to do much more. We need to ensure that there is a lot of anti-India rhetoric that we see often stemming from academia. Now that is also due to either willful ignorance, or it is, a lot of times it is done in a very feral manner, where academicians use their power to basically, encourage anti-India information campaigns. I'm talking about universities like King's College, where I passed out from. You have the India Study Center there, which is often in the news peddling anti-India disinformation. I think that's where I think India needs to ensure that they're able to mitigate and clamp down on that sort of disinformation right at the root of it, so that it doesn't sort of further into the diaspora. Now, what that does is, when academicians use their power to yield disinformation, it sort of conditions a set of people, a generation of people, to believe in certain values, in certain information, and then they grow up with that. And that can be avoided if the policymakers in India realize this. Rajiv Malhotra from the US has written very well about this in his books, The Snakes in the Ganges, and a number of other books, where he talks about how Indian monies, the Ambanis and the Mahindras, who are investing in the US universities, but are not actively looking at where the investments are being used, where the monies of Indians are being used by the academicians abroad to basically write anti-India and anti-Hindu information.
And how do diaspora groups like yours then play a role in keeping countering not just the narrative that needs to be countered, but also keeping Indian culture alive and vibrant abroad?
So from a cultural perspective, I think there are a number of organizations which exist, which look at festivals, which look at language and dance classes. Now you actually have schools which are looking at a very Indic form of education system. So there are the Avanti schools in the UK, for instance. They've now they span across the London and the Leicester metropolitan cities. And they are basically looking at education from a very yoga-centric perspective, a very dharmic sense, a very human touch to education at large. So there are organizations which is doing that sort of job. But from a more political, societal perspective, there are very few organizations which are actually taking that mantle and challenging the norms, challenging the age-old biases which we see often demonstrated by the BBC, for instance. How the BBC uses its platform to basically call Holi a filthy festival, but there is absolutely no challenge coming from the government of India. So it's down to people like us.
But are people really giving into that kind of a narrative? Because there are still a huge section of people abroad who are embracing Indian values, culture, tradition, religion, festivities. So many of them are now moving to India altogether. Rishikesh, for instance, there are so many foreigners out there who've embraced that way of life and really don't want to give into this kind of a narrative. So what I'm saying is that there are, I think, all kinds of people, and it's what you want to believe in and what you pick really for yourself. But Mr. Wadhwa, closing remarks here. Yeah, running out of time, so I need to quickly wrap up.
I was just going to say quickly that you see the surge of far right in across Europe and America, so that will have an impact on the Indians living there. Sorry, Mr. Wadhwa.
Okay, lovely. Mr. Wadhwa, closing remarks. Because
what I would say is that a lot of what you're hearing is a tempest in a teacup. Yes, on social media you've got the anti-H1B people going crazy. Yes, you've got a bunch of academics who are so extreme left and out of touch that they don't know what they're doing. You also have a Khalistani movement, but this is the fringe. Just like we have a fringe in India, we have a fringe in the United States and Europe that is very loud and noisy. But the rest of America respects Indians. The fact that you can have Indian, and half Indian almost becoming president of the United States, the fact that you have, Indians running for Senate and for governorships and so on, is because Indians are widely respected. We are everywhere. We're in universities, doctors, schools, you name it, Indians are everywhere, and they're building trust and confidence and respect from Americans. So yes, you're hearing a lot of noise right now, but don't get, let's not have that overshadow what we're doing. Indians are achieving success everywhere, and they're uplifting the world because of their culture and their values.
And what's the biggest responsibility, Mr. Wadhwa, that lies on them? So the biggest responsibility of successful Indian abroads, if you could just sum this up for us in 30 seconds.
We have to educate, we have to educate, we have to inspire, we have to motivate, we have to show them the depth of our culture and values, we have to teach them, give back to the world the way India always has. This is why India was always respected, because it was always giving to the world. Nalanda University used to teach the world, okay? Our culture and values are all over the world. We have to continue that and remember what we have and value our what we have here, our culture and values.
Okay. Adit, I want to come to you. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to quickly swing in 2-3 questions because it's a day that we really need to discuss where we're headed. Tell us if you can recall or share a moment when you felt most Indian outside of India, because that's also a point of reflection on how a lot of people you live by your day and you don't end up realizing these small little things. So give us a quick example if you have any.
I think for me, watching Sadiq Khan, who's the mayor of London, come out to Trafalgar Square and celebrate Diwali with scores of Indians, I think that was a celebration on its own. It sort of, took us back a few years to how Diwali was basically celebrated and should be celebrated across the world, where it's just not confined to one particular religious community, but it should be celebrated across humanity. Because it's a fight of good over evil, and that is the spirit that it should be celebrated in. So the fact that a Muslim mayor of London came in to celebrate that, goes to demonstrate that this has an appeal across the continents, across religious lines, etc. And that's the sort of Indianness that I think one can be particularly extremely proud about.
Mr. Wadhwa, would you have a moment on top of your mind when you felt most Indian outside of India, or does that keep happening every now and then?
You see, when I fight these battles with the anti-immigrant groups, when I now talk about Indian culture and values, this is the Indianness in me. I take pride in Indian culture. If you can hear the things I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes, there are a lot of problems in India. There's a lot to be concerned about, sad about. There are extreme fringe, elements in India also. But the fact is that when you look deeper than that, when I look at myself, when I look at what I'm doing now, the fact that I'm spending day and night giving back to society is because of what my parents taught me, what India taught me, what India gave me. So it's given me a gift to give me a purpose and to give me a reason to exist and to work hard. I don't know what more you can expect from any country.
Yeah. Thank you to the both of you. That's all the time we have, but thank you for inspiring us, for really walking the talk and really painting this beautiful image of India while you continue to stay a little away from all of us.